What's going on, Bears fans? With the season finally in the books and all wrapped up, the grind still don't stop though, because now draft season's right around the corner, Danny. We're 2 weeks from the combine, so the season ends and it starts right back. How you doing, man? How are you ready to grind this tape and talk about some draft prospects here on Draft on Tap with me?
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I've started this process actually, late January, or actually early January, mid January to late. Obviously, with the Bear season going so late, then we pleasantly surprised. I
Yeah.
think I got a little bit of a late start on grinding some of this tape, but yeah, I'm full into it here. First and foremost, before I get into the draft, I'm excited to have you jump on and co-host with me this season. I think it's going to be a great season, a great shows. List shows that we have coming up here for you guys, for all the barflies, for all the Bears fans, for NFL draft fans. We're not going to discriminate, right? We're going to be Bears focused, but we're going to cover the entire NFL draft here. So I'm happy and excited to have AC here with me. We bring me some of that Kentucky Wildcat knowledge that I can tap into here on Draft on Tap. I'm looking forward, excited, coming off a great season with the Bears here and Ben Johnson's first season, coming off with a really good draft last year. Excited to see what the Bears do here. So I've been grinding some of the tape with the East-West Shrine game. I've had access to the practice tapes for both those and the Senior Bowl. Got some notes on some of the players that stood out there for me. And obviously, like you said, in a week or so, the combine starts, and that's the next phase here in the process. So as we get down here, we're going to start breaking some of these prospects down, putting up some of their tape up, and we'll cover the defensive end position tonight as we break this down. But AC, go ahead and let the people know what we got planned for them tonight.
Yeah, I just figured, after really the past two Super Bowls, the key to those teams was really just a consistent pass rush, which we did not see in Chicago. We had a fantastic year, led the league in takeaways, but the way we were able to do that without generating pressure, we were 31st in the NFL in pressures, is just that it just doesn't happen. I said it all year. I said it last year. Heck, I've been saying it since Jared Verse was coming out. I consider myself a little bit of a draft nerd. I don't grind the tape as much as everybody else does, but I listen to and try to gather information leading into draft time. And I wanted Jared Verse really bad that year, and we didn't get him. And now you see him playing really good for the Rams. But that's water under the bridge. We're going to dig into these prospects. You were talking about the Senior Bowl. Who are some of the guys that you saw at the Senior Bowl that you may have wanted to touch on? I caught like highlights, but some of the guys that really stood out and some of the practices that I heard were mostly like skill guys like Malachi Fields and Garrett Nussmeier. All of a sudden, starting to get more draft buzz after not a great year. But those are the guys that I heard about. But what were you looking into?
Right. So heading into the East-West Shrine game and even the Senior Bowl, obviously I've got my Bears needs already kind of in my head, right? And it starts off for me, like you said, the last two Super Bowl champions get after the quarterback. And this year the Bears led the league in takeaways, but their average, rush, actual getting to the quarterback and sacking, the percentages were horrible, right? So I think that was just a credit to Dennis Allen, just kind of taking what he had on that roster and making what he could do with it. And for the most part, it was successful, right? But there were those games. I remember the games against the 49ers and some other games where the Bears just had no answer for the opponent or the opposing offense. And this is where, I always go back to some of my roots when I scout. And my belief is you have a good offensive line, defensive line, you have a good team. The Bears fixed the offensive line last offseason, those three big free agents, along with the drafting of Ozzie Trapillo. They got to do the same thing this offseason. They got to attack that defensive line, right? And then that's where my focus was in going into both these East-West Shrine and Senior Bowl games. However, there are some other players that kind of jumped there and caught my eye there as well. So, going to the Senior Bowl, looking at some of the defensive linemen on the national team. We're going to talk about this kid later on tonight, but Zion Young from Missouri, it's a guy that really, shows some of that physicality, some of that length, some of that power that you want to see at the edge position that Dennis Allen likes to see at the edge position. He's a guy that I think made his presence known there at the Senior Bowl. Danny Dennis' son, this kid we're going to talk about later on today as well, from Penn State, had a, it was a really consistent performer for Penn State, but never really flashed, never really was one headline grabbers, but just a consistent performer. Not a guy that's going to probably go on day one, but maybe a day two possibility. We'll get to Danny Dennis' son from Penn State later on as well. Lee Hunter from Texas Tech. He's a defensive tackle. He's a guy that we'll talk about next week when we get into that position group. Those are from guys from Devin Eastern, this kid from Minnesota, defensive tackle. Another one, Braw. Has a little underdeveloped lower half, but again, just made his presence felt with physicality, popping in terms of as a run defender. Again, nothing that's gonna wow anybody on the highlight reels or anything like that, but just the intricate stuff that you see when you watch the defensive line play, hand position, his ability to control gaps, so on and so forth. I think he's someone that could be a day three possibility there as well. So those are the guys on the national team. In terms of the American team. Another guy, TJ Parker. We're going to talk about him here today as well. Gabe Yakis, the kid from Illinois. A lot of scouts I've spoken to so far, I see him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. That might be the way he plays, and I think that's
he had pretty good size. Like he would be defensive end.
He's about 6'3", 260, but the length's going to come in around 32 and a half inch in terms of his arm length, and that's a big thing with Dennis Allen, and we'll get into that as we kind of break down the defensive end position here as well. So, but one guy that really stood out for me, and again, some might say he's not a scheme fit. But, man, every time you watch those Senior Bowl practices, this kid was making a presence. And that's someone that everyone here in the Midwest would know, Big Ten country would know. It's Derek Moore from Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Physical. It was physical. He came in at 6'3", 254 with 33-inch arm length, which, again, Senior Bowl measurements, you take them with a grain of salt, right? I've been trying to kind of, check some of the contacts I have in the league and see if I can confirm any of these numbers. Everyone says to me, just wait till the combine. That's when the official numbers will come out and we'll look at that. But if Derek Moore comes in at 254, or I'm sorry, almost 260 at 6'3", 260 with 33-inch arms, I think there's an outside chance he could be a defensive end in this league. And I think the way he plays with physicality and what he did at the Senior Bowl, I think he's a guy that really intrigues me, especially in this Dennis Allen scheme here. So we'll get into him later on as well. But other players flash as well. He talks about, this kid, Josh Cameron, a big, sturdy receiver from Baylor. J.C. Davis, left tackle from Illinois, to me had some nice games. Tyron Montgomery, a receiver out of John Carroll. I think he was a lot of people were talking about him as well. So there were a ton of players that made their presence felt. But the one guy that I really, really liked, that was not a front seven guy. And I know safety is going to be a position we're going to talk about a lot this offseason. Everyone's dying for a safety. And I'm the guy that says Jaquan Brisker was not worth a second-round pick, and I think that's been proven over the years. I'm not drafting a safety in the first one. I love Caleb Downs in this draft, but he's not going to be there. First of all, 25. Second thing, you have a lot of needs up front, but the guy, a safety, I want you guys to keep an eye on. Possibly, maybe third round. We'll see how he does here. Bud Clark from TCU. This is a kid that was a ball hawk throughout the week here at the Senior Bowl. I fell in love with the kid. 6'1", 185, can come down and slide, can cover receivers. He was covering tight ends, jump back in coverage, has no fear in terms of coming down. And obviously you can't really tackle to the ground to the practices, but he was bumping some guys, right? And I love what he brought. And he brought some swagger there as well. So Bud Clark, TCU safety, keep that name in your back of your mind, guys. That's a guy, again, I'm not talking about day one. I'm talking about maybe day two, maybe late day two. If they can pluck that guy and fill him in at safety, I think that's a nice guy to bring in. So those are just some of the names. I have a ton of names here on my list, guys. I don't want to. It's only an hour show. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but those are some of the names that really caught my eye going into Senior Bowl, coming out of Senior Bowl week, I should say. And then now, obviously, they'll hopefully take some of that momentum that they created down in Mobile over to Indianapolis at the Combine, put up some nice numbers, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, you touched on some of the big ones there. I've been seeing Bud Clark quite a bit, third, fourth round guy. And Derek Moore really had a hell of the practices leading up to the Senior Bowl, and then in the game he really stood out. Those one-on-one drills, I feel like you can't see a lot as an offensive lineman type for the one-on-one drills, but I feel like you could probably use that to see what the defensive lineman's going to do if they're out there on an island, like our defensive ends would be, if they can get around and those types of things. So, yeah, those are definitely guys that we'll be looking into. You did mention safety, and I've got our team needs scrolling across the bottom: defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, left tackle, corner, safety, a dynamic speed running back, and a speed wide receiver. Now, I personally have the safety, probably the safety in the corner switch. I still think left tackle is a little big with Ozzie going down. I think they'll look into free agency to handle that, though. And dealing with free agency, I mean, we got Kevin Byard. All of our safeties are free agents. So
Right.
it's got to be a need. I think Byard needs to be brought back. He was a leader on and off the field. So that's someone to bring back. But since we're covering defensive ends today, Trey Hendrickson, I'm an hour from Cincinnati. They did him wrong up there, but I've loved the guy for 2 or 3 years. I mean, 17 and a half sacks of back-to-back seasons. What more can you do to prove yourself? He did have some injuries last year, but I think some of that was he was like, I'm not going to be here anymore, so I'm going to save myself. And then today Bradley Chubb was released. So those are some of the defensive ends out there. What are your thoughts on Trey Hendrickson or any other edge rusher or any other free agent that you're looking at?
Right. In terms of veteran free agency, obviously, the names like Trey Hendrickson gets brought up a lot. Max Crosby, gets thrown around a lot as well. That's more of a trade there. But the one thing with the Bears is they've committed so much capital in terms of money already into that defensive line. Montez Sweat is signed long term. Dio Adangbo, even though he had a disappointing first season with Chicago, he's still signed. He's coming off an Achilles. Austin Booker, for me, towards tail end that last season, he was making a difference there. So that's definitely a need. I just don't know in terms of how much they want to go ahead and invest big money into a veteran. You mentioned, the guy from Cincinnati in terms of, how much he's going to want. He's coming off, he's 31 years old. He's coming off of, back surgery or back injury. How much is he looking for? How much can you invest? Now, I know the cap's going up, and I know the Bears are going to do a bunch of restructuring here to go and free up some cap space. But if you could bring in a Hendrickson and not give up draft capital and just pluck him in and make the money work, hey, do it. Go for it. Hendrickson has the relationship with Dennis Allen going back to his days with the Saints, so there's familiarity there. So I think that would work there as well. I think as long as you don't break the bank for him, I just don't know in terms of how much they're willing to invest in terms of money and cap space on that position, right? So that's where it gets a little tricky here. Now, everybody says, you can do some cap gymnastics and make it work. Great. If you can do that, I'm not smart enough to know how to fix that salary cap. So that's the thing. I stay out of it. Typically, previous shows, I tell all the other capologists of the bar room, you go and take care of that. Let me know how it's going to work. And I know, Sport Track the website does a great job of clearing that up. But if you can restructure contracts, make some space, not get yourself into cap hell moving down, in future years. Remember, a couple of years, Caleb Williams going to come knocking on that door for that extension as well. So, if he continues in the trajectory he's been going this past season, he's going to be making some of that big money there as well. So, if you can make it work with Trey Hendrickson, great. I just don't know how they'll do it. If they can, I'm all for it. But if not, I think you draft a young kid, whether it's in your first round, maybe second round, wherever kind of falls on your board there. And you kind of now invest into the development of Austin Booker, continue investing. I was high on Austin Booker coming out of Kansas.
Yeah.
I love the progress he made. Unfortunately, the injury made him miss about 8 games this year. Came back the second half of the season. He was one of the better pass rushers, consistent pass rushers on the opposite side of Montez Sweat. So if he continues that trajectory, that development, I'm all game there for Austin Booker. Obviously mentioned about, Dio Odengbo, come back from an Achilles injury. Not sure where he's going to be in terms of recovery.
Might kick him inside the 3-tech more often, and Shamar Turner's coming back. Maybe they'll swap those guys.
That's another guy. I was going to right now. Shamar Turner, their second round pick. They were playing him at defensive end last year. When he got hurt, when he tore his ACL. So again, another guy coming off an injury. Where is he going to be at in terms of recovery, in terms of start of the season? So they have bodies they can play with there. So yeah, again, it's all going to be, how much can you manage a cap? How much is Trey Hendrickson going to ask for? If you're going to go out and trade for Max Crosby, he's already signed for a big lucrative you have to you're going to get rid of players to get them, right? Do you want to get rid of a DJ Moore or a Cole Kmet, or both, and hit your offense to bring in a guy like Max Crosby? Again, hell of a player, 29 years old, has had 7 injuries or 7 surgeries in the last 8 seasons, guys. So he's not a guy, while he plays hurt. He's a guy that gets banged up a lot, right? So you got to also factor at him and keep that in mind as well. Because remember, you're not building this for a flash in a pan, 1 year, 2 year, try and make the Super Bowl, whatever. You're trying to build this for longevity, for a nice, consistent winning program here with Ben Johnson and his staff. So that's where I would be like, all right, Trey Hendrickson, great, love the guy. There's some concerns there, medical stuff, age, but if you can get a reasonable contract out of him, and he wants to come here, play for Dennis Allen again, and be a contributor, if you can make it work, let's do it. But if not, the draft is always the way to go for me.
Well, speaking of that, Ozzy Trapillo, they drafted in the 2nd round last year. He doesn't start at left tackle right away, but when he does finally get his shot, he plays really well over there, in my opinion. He goes down with an injury at the end, patellar tendon, which was awful. So he'll probably miss. You think he'll miss this whole season or quite a bit of it?
If not the whole season, he's not coming back till probably mid to late season, right? So you're going to be needing a starter at left tackle, right? How much faith do you have in Theo Benedict? I mean, you don't have enough faith to start him versus the Rams. You kicked out Joe Thuney to play left tackle there. So I know they just signed him back to a 1-year modest contract, Theo, that is. He was a guy that was a starter for a couple of games. Then they benched him and put an Ozzy, who, like I said, who did well. I had faith in Ozzy. I was one of the only ones here saying, hey, this guy can play left tackle. And he went in, he wasn't perfect, right? He wasn't perfect, but he held up well and he was doing well. But unfortunately, that patella tendon injury, that's a serious knee injury. And we'll see how long it takes. So that's why OT off the tackle is a major need for me for the Bears. Now, do you want to go and invest another high pick on another young player? When you already have Ozzy coming back, you have Darnell Wright on the opposite side. Obviously Ozzy can play both sides. I've said Darnell Wright can be a great all-pro right guard, but he's been playing well at right tackle. You don't want to move that around. So I think the logical way, if you don't believe, if Ben Johnson and his staff are not sold on either Karan Amargaji or Theo being a full-time starter, I think Braxton Jones, that ship has sailed. I don't think they're re-signing him. I don't think they're bringing him back. I think what they do is they go out, look for one of these veteran stopgap guys, guys like
Cam Robinson's kind of been that for the last 4 years. I mean, it's just a 1-year stopgap.
Yeah, but see, Cam Robinson's not a guy that I have a lot of faith in. I rather roll a dice with a young guy than go give money to Cam Robinson. He's been a pretty much a bust, if you will, since he came out of Alabama. So, but I mean, if you go get one of these veterans to get cut, whether it's a cap casualty, who knows, right? We can pull up the list here of veteran free agents. It's not pretty in terms of who's out there, who's available. But maybe one of these cap casualty guys will get cut, and then next thing you know, that the Bears can go pluck him in for a 1 year and just have him, kind of stabilize left tackle until Ozzy's fully recovered and back and healthy. So that could be something that that they could look at there as well.
Well, speaking of cap casualties, Bradley Chubb gets cut today from the Miami Dolphins as they try to start clearing their cap. We'll see what they do with Tua. They still owe him a ton of money, and he hasn't done a whole lot. Does he fit the system here? Do you think Bradley Chubb can bring us anything off the edge if we were to bring him? I know the cap is a whole different situation, but if they can make it work, do you think Bradley Chubb is a guy you'd be interested in being on our roster next year?
Yeah, definitely a guy that's been productive when he's been healthy. Obviously, coming off the ACL injury a couple of years ago, so he's a guy that definitely could come and help. I don't. You asked me if he's a scheme fit. Not really. He's been more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. That's where he's been playing predominantly when he's been in the NFL. Could he come in and be a pass rush specialist? I think that's where you can kind of book him in there. So you have your base guys, whether it's we talked about Sherman Turner, we talked about Odemgo, we talked about maybe Austin Booker, and then now you're bringing a Bradley Chubb to kind of help infuse some juice to that pass rush. That I could see that happening. But in terms of him being a down out defensive end for you, I don't know if that's a precise scheme fit there for Dennis Allen. but definitely the guy who intrigues me in terms of what he can bring off the edge as a pass rusher for sure.
Yeah, and I kind of like what this guy's saying here. Don't go to other people's wells to drink. Go get your own, which is what we're all about here on Draft on Tap. I just wanted to cover some of the latest news. That Bradley Chubb news hit today, and I knew Bears fans would possibly be interested, and I was interested myself. But today we're going to talk about defensive ends that are coming out in the draft. Do you want me to just start at the top that we got, or did you want me? You want to go from your least to your favorite, or how do you want me to do this, Danny?
So what I wanted to do was I obviously first round pick 25 is what the Bears have, right? And you're kind of at the mercy of whatever's available on the board. So going through the draft process, going through some of these prospects that I've already kind of looked at. There's 4 that I've kind of earmarked that could be possibilities if the Bears went defensive end in the first round. And again, a lot can play into this, right? There's free agency we just talked about. Do they fill that need with free agency? If they fill a need for free agency, obviously this is all just talk here. But if they don't, if they go ahead and look and at the draft that possibly filling that need at defensive end. These are the 4 guys for me that I see could possibly be there, and more importantly, could be put into the scheme by Dennis Allen, right? If you want, if you can just go ahead and pick whichever one you want. You have queued up there.
I got to be honest. This is a guy that you mentioned him earlier a little bit. Zion Young out of Missouri. I absolutely love the way this guy plays the game. So I'm going to bring up some of his tape here. And let it play. Let some of our viewers see what he's got going on right here on the edge. Just fighting through, chasing guys down, just relentless pursuit, fighting through garbage and stuff. But I love what he does. Even, right here, he sacks the South Carolina quarterback who a lot of people thought would do a lot better, Lenore Sellers. But as an SEC guy, I saw quite a bit of this guy. And I just love his relentless pursuit. His motor never stops, in my opinion.
That's the thing with Zion Young. He's a guy that coming into the season. Him and Damian Wilson, opposite of him, I believe the Georgia transfer was a guy that were really kind of earmarked for in terms of what they could do here at this season. And obviously Wilson, to me, it was a little bit of a disappointment. He's actually transferring to Miami. Damian Wilson and Zion Young is actually coming out, and he's a senior. You mentioned it. He's a former Michigan State player. He's a transfer from Michigan State. He's been a 2-year starter at Missouri. He's got 26 starts there. The thing about this kid is he's not only strong and physical, he's also very smart. 2 times he's just SEC academic All-American. So he's not just the guy that does just a football only, but he's a guy that puts the work in off the football field as well. Now you do appreciate that, right? Because you want guys that have the ability to digest a playbook and also think out there on their feet. And that's the thing with Zion Young is he's a guy who brings physicality, and that's something that Dennis Allen loves in his defensive ends. He wants guys that have size and they have the length and they bring physicality. So Young's measuring at 6'5", 262. Again, these are all the Senior Bowl measurements. The official measurements will be done at the combine, but he's got 33.5-inch arms, and that fits that criteria in terms of what Dennis Allen is looking for in terms of size, physicality, and arm length. And I think this is a guy. While his sack numbers weren't, they didn't pop off the chart for you or anything like that. He only had 6.5 sacks this past year, but he had 16.5 tackles for loss. So that tells you he's getting into the backfield and he's making his presence felt. And that's the thing with him. Again, it's talk about physicality. He's not going to be a guy that's going to explode with that first step into the into the offensive lineman. Doesn't have that quick twitch or the ankle flexion or the flexibility in his lower half to be able to turn that corner, bend and just fly into to the quarterback. Those are the elite pass rushers, right? But what he brings you again, size, physicality, length, and he'll just bully his way back to the quarterback. So his best move is just he presses the offensive tackle, he extends his arms, presses him, and walks him back into the pocket or into the lap of the quarterback. So that is what he does. And again, his whole game is based off of being physical and getting after the quarterback and being relentless. You talked about his motor. That's the guy that doesn't take a down off, and he's always going after it, whether it's the run game or the pass rush. So I think in terms of, for me now coming into the draft process though, like I had a second round grade on him, so we'll see how it goes. He did very well at the Senior Bowl. So that's the first step right there, is you start working that the draft process, if you will. That's the first step, and he did well there, right? He caught eyes, he made a lot of headlines there. And then now the second step is, how does he test, right, at the combine?
Right.
How do you do and most importantly, how does he do on the interviews, right? And obviously the medicals are important as well. And from there, now you can move forward. But I think because he doesn't have the quick twitch fibers, he doesn't have that elite pass rush trait, in terms of the lower half, the flexibility. I think that's why he's a guy that could be available in the lower half of that first round at pick 25. Maybe could be available, top of the second round. We'll see how it goes. But he's a guy that really fits the criteria. Again, size, length, and physicality, and that's what he brings. And I think that's something that Dennis Allen will love, and the coaches will love when he see his tape.
Yeah, and if the Bears can trade down and pick up some extra draft picks, I'm always good with that as well.
I'm always good with that too. I love draft picks.
Yeah, you mentioned his medicals, and the next guy I'd like to talk about, he's a redshirt senior, Akeem Mesidor out of Miami. A lot of people love this guy. Played in the national championship game opposite Ruben Bain. His biggest question mark, it seems like, is his age. We got some tape on him too, so I'll let that play.
Well, yeah, he's a 6th-year senior. He's gonna be 25 when the draft comes around. So that's the thing. But he's had a history of medicals. You mentioned he's had a history of foot injuries. So that's something that scares you right away, right? Started off his career at West Virginia and then ended up transferring over to Miami. Had a sensational year this year. Teamed up with Ruben Bain, who will probably go in the top 10, top 15 of this draft class. But we talked about some of these players, these prospects. They're not perfect fits, right? Some don't have the quick twitch fibers you look for. Some don't have the length. Some don't have the physicality. Some don't have the production. But what Mesidor does, he brings you that quickness, that first step quickness. He's relentless in terms of getting upfield and getting after the quarterback. 12 and a half sacks this past year, 4 forced fumbles, 17 and a half tackles for loss. He had a damn good year. But again, you're going back to why could he be there at 25? Well, medicals are a big thing. Had multiple, foot injuries that, one in 2003, I think, sidelined him for most of the season. He's going to be 25 years old when the draft rolls around. That's something that a lot of teams kind of, poo-poo on. They'll push those guys typically to the second round. Right. And he's only 6'2". Well, his arm length, we'll see what that comes out. I try to see what he measures in terms of his arm length. My contacts couldn't give me any information, but we'll see what comes in there at Miami. But if he comes in at 33 or 34 inch arms, which I don't think he's got 34 inch arms, but he's probably going to be 32 and a half to 33. You're right there on that line there at 6'2", 265. He doesn't fit the physical criteria, if you will, that Dennis Allen loves, but he gives you that elite first step quickness. He gives you the ability to bend that corner and finish. Talk about someone who's got the ankle flexion, the ability to turn that corner flat and get to the quarterback. Gives you that. Again, there are other questions off the football field that you're going to have to answer with him. So again, medicals are going to be huge for Mesidor. But in terms of the last couple of seasons, in terms of what he's done production wise, again, 12 and a half sacks, 17 and a half tackles for loss this past year. The year before, only 5 and a half sacks, but still 9 tackles for loss. Still a very productive player. If you get him in the bottom half of the first round, top of the second round, again, not a perfect fit. So I'm not sure what Dennis Allen's going to feel about him. But if you're looking at this class, you're looking at specifically at defensive ends and what they bring and what they offer, I think he's someone that Dennis Allen could be intrigued by.
Yeah, and some of that tape that we had there, I like to see him fighting through that junk and playing the run really well. I think that was against Louisville, if I'm not mistaken, where he kind of fights through the guard and tackle there to bring down the running back. You love to see that. Another guy, our next guy, plays the run really well, is Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. I'll run his tape. He's I believe a junior, so he's kind of a younger player, but I noticed you put a lot of Kentucky tape on this one, which kind of hurt my heart.
just for you, AC, just so you can see it. But no, this is the guy. Now we talked about, right? Different flavors for different folks, right? Not everyone's perfect. This guy has the body type. He's a prototypical defensive end for Dennis Allen, right? 6'5", 285. He's going to have between 33 and a half to 34 inch arm length. He's a guy. He's a terrific athlete. He lettered in both in basketball and in football in high school. A 2-year starter for Auburn, but the production is not there, right? He was a guy that I actually highlighted in my Shimon Draft Scout top 5 defensive ends at the beginning of the season. And coming off of a 7-sack season last year with 11 tackles for loss, I thought this guy had the ability to kind of ascend and take that next step. For whatever reason, it just didn't happen in terms of sack numbers. He only had 2 sacks. 0 forced fumbles. He did have 7 quarterback hits, right? So he was getting some pressure there at the quarterback, 5 tackles for loss. So statistically, he didn't have the season that I was anticipating and a lot of scouts were anticipating for him having. Right. But you go back to the physique. He's got the length. He's got the size. He's got the athletic ability. And you put on his tape, this guy's a damn good run defender already, right? You talk about him shedding blocks, press. So again, that's going to be something that's a lot of scouts, a lot of coaches will love to see that about him already, right? Because he's got the tools. He's got the tool set. It's just you got to refine it. You got to be able to coach him up to be a better pass rusher, be a more consistent pass rusher, right? We saw it last year in 2024 with 7 sacks. We just didn't see it this past season for whatever reason it was, right? And that's where you dig into now. What happened? Was it a different scheme fit? Was something going on with how they were utilizing them at Auburn? It's just the numbers weren't there stat-wise, but you put on his tape, and this kid is all over the tape, especially here on run defense, right? He makes his presence felt. So again, thinking that right there, and again, talk about the physical, prowess that he has. Perfect prototypical Dennis Allen type defensive end. So I think if he's available, I think this is the guy that Dennis Allen's going to want to bring in, and his coaching staff is going to say, well, we'll get him to get after the quarterback. He's got what I look. He's like, I got the size, he's got the athletic ability, he's got the length. He's got production in the past, just didn't have a good season this last year. He plays that run damn well. Right. We'll get him to be a better pass rusher. And I think that's something that intrigues me. Of all these guys we're going to talk about right now, this kid, Keldrick Falk from Auburn, is the ideal fit for what Dennis Allen wants in a defensive end.
So this will be a Dennis Allen guy saying, go get me my edge rusher that can stop the run. Like we said, a lot of that on tape was him stopping the run. His head coach did get fired at Auburn this year, so maybe there was a scheme issue or an issue with he wasn't using him correctly. Actually, right after that Kentucky game, Auburn fired their head coach because I think the game was like 10-3 or something. Really, really mucked it up, those two. But yeah, I love watching him, like we've said, fight through the trash, get in there, bring down the running back. And the last one, I'm not sure if he's going to make it all the way to us. The last one that we're going to talk about here is TJ Parker, the edge rusher out of Clemson. We got a couple of clips of him here. This is here at the Senior Bowl, the one-on-ones, where he takes the tackle and just puts him on his butt. Yep. Clemson had so much they had a lot of talent this year, and they just didn't live up to expectations. What can you tell me about TJ Parker?
And then the poster child for not living up to expectations was TJ Parker. This kid was coming in again. Another one. He's on Shimon Draft Scout, my YouTube page. He was one of my top 5 defensive ends coming into the season. This guy was coming off a monster 2024, 11 sacks, 6 forced fumbles last year, 19.5 tackles for loss. He was a beast last year for Clemson. So I think, coming in, he was the guy that a lot of teams had earmarked as one of these elite pass rushers. And again, for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen this year at Clemson. Finished with only 5 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. So I think, again, that's is where the scouts now go into those, those school visits and find out, what's going on, what happened, what happened in terms of the production, why it wasn't there. A lot of times these guys coming off these big years, they draw more attention, right, from blockers, from chips, and all that stuff. So I think, but this is a guy, again, going back to what he does. He's not, super twitchy. He's not, the elite burst and all that stuff, but he gives you power. You see some of these clips here. He just brings some physicality, brings power. Doesn't have the elite length that you're looking for in size, but he's at 6'3", 263. Could add about another 7-10 pounds on him, make him 270, 273. Got 33 plus inch arm length, so he fits that criteria. But again, he brings physicality. He brings a guy that could put a tackle on his ass just by planting his hands in his chest and walking him backwards. We saw that clip on the one-on-ones in the Senior Bowl. Just took took that one offensive lineman and just kind of turned him with one arm and walked him back into the quarterback. So, these are the things that he brings, and this is what is really kind of caught a lot of these scouts' eyes. All right, this guy didn't have the season that we anticipated him having, but we see some of the stuff. He's got the ability to generate pressure. He's got the ability to be physical at the point of attack. And again, some teams I've talked to, or I should say some scouts talked to, say that they see him more of the 3-4 outside linebacker. So again, it all depends on what you're looking at, but not the ideal fit. Again, go back to what I said earlier. It's going to be not the perfect guy, but it's something where the physicality and what he brings in terms of what he's done before, I think this is something that Dennis Allen could look at and say, I can work with him. I can work with TJ Parker. But you mentioned as well, AC, he had a great week at the Senior Bowl. And, if there's any talk about this kid dropping to the bottom half of the first round, that may have been erased by what teams saw there at the Senior Bowl. So obviously a lot to be determined, right? There's still the combine, there's still the interview process, bring him into the team facility, see how he does there. But again, highly touted prospect coming into the season, had a down year for whatever reason. And now he's looking to kind of bounce back up in terms of his stock. The Senior Bowl was a great start for TJ Parker. Let's see if he continues to move up there, or will he be there for the Bears to possibly, look at.
Yeah, it was crazy. Clemson coming into the season were national championship contenders. A lot of people were looking for them to make that run to the title game, and it just, for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. TJ Parker's part of that, and a defensive tackle. We're going to talk about defensive tackles in a couple of weeks, but I'm sure we'll talk about Peter Woods when that comes up as well. But some other guys that those were your 4 first-round guys. So these are the guys that might be there at 25.
These were guys, these are first-round guys. These are potential first-round guys. If you stay at 25, and if defensive end is a position they're going to go for, these are 4 guys that I could see being worthy of that 25th first-round pick.
Absolutely. So to wrap it all up, those 4 guys is TJ Parker out of Clemson, Zion Young from Missouri, Akeem Mesidor from Miami, and Keldrick Falk from Auburn. Obviously, we know about Reuben Bain. We know about Arvell Reese, but those are guys that are going top 5, top 10.
And even those guys, AC, they're not ideal fits here for this scheme, right? Now, if Arvell Reese is available, because the Bears need help at off-ball linebacker, that's a different story, right? He's not going to be available. He's talking about top 5 guy. This guy, as an off-ball linebacker, he's another one of those molds in terms of like Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter kind of types, right? Guys that can be an off-ball linebacker, but also can provide pressure off the edge. That's a different kind of cat, right? You hopefully Dennis Allen be like, yeah, he hasn't fit my scheme in terms of measurables, but you know what? I'll take him because I'll make it work.
I'll take that athlete. Yeah.
I believe in Dennis Allen. I think he would do that. Reuben Bain is a guy that's really curious. Like, he's a guy that man, he's got some physicality. He's got a stout frame. Again, doesn't have the length, doesn't have the size. There's even talk about kicking him inside to a 3 technique, which to me, is a bit, I guess, premature. We'll see how that goes. But again, just doesn't have that. Some teams I know are talking about him as a 3-4 linebacker. They want to stand him up in a 2-point stand. So I'll be curious to see, but I either way, I don't see those 2 guys dropping, to the Bears at all, 25, and I don't see the Bears moving up to get either one of them, to be honest with you. So that's why I said, I was going to be realistic. I wasn't going to bring those guys up because I'm like, they're not going to be there.
Right.
The 25. So I'm going to give you realistic guys, realistic names. And hey, like I said earlier, if the Bears go and sign Trey Hendrickson, neither one of these guys is probably going to be drafted by the Bears. So we'll see. But if they say 25 and the need is still defensive end, I think these 4 guys are realistic options.
Well, I mean, we got some people in the chat talking about defensive tackle. Like I said, we'll talk about them on the next show. But, I mean, I'm seeing McDonald in here. I'm seeing Caleb Banks. So if the Bears are to grab a defensive tackle in that first round, A, do you think they'll double up? And B, we've got some options if that is the plan. And you think they can go D tackle, D in?
The good news is, and spoiler alert, obviously we'll get into defense tackles next show. But if I had to say right now what they're going to select with that first round, I think defensive tackle might be the area they might go with, right? Because we talked about in terms of these defensive ends, they're not perfect in terms of scheme fits. Some are, some not. Production hasn't been there. But there are some beasts up front, and defensive tackle to me is a much bigger need, if you will, than defensive end. some reason we touched on earlier. Some of the players already on the roster, Austin Booker developing. But defensive tackle, I mean, you got, Billings, who was on the last year of his contract, and God bless him. But how much does he have left in the tank? Yeah. Obviously, Grady Jarrett, free agent signing last year, really for me was not that much of an impact player. You saw signs of him getting better towards the end of the season. That was encouraging, but we see how it goes into this year, right? Another, veteran aging player. For me, guys, and this might be unpopular, but Gervon Dexter is on the bubble. I mean, he's on a roster bubble. And this is a guy that they had on high second round pick that they invested in that really we just anticipate him, making that next jump, making that leap, being consistent. But for whatever sack he gets or whatever good game he has 2 or 3 games where he disappears and no one knows where the hell Gervon Dexter is. So, he had 6 sacks last year. Which of the 6 sacks were impact sacks in your opinion? Do you remember any of his 6 sacks last year? I don't.
I remember the thumbs up celebration early in the season, but it didn't. But
when we needed him versus the Rams and some of the other teams, he was nowhere to be found. So to me, Gervon Dexter is on the roster bubble. So we'll see how it goes there. So that's why for me, it is defensive tackle is a huge need heading into the draft, and we will dive deep into that position next season. But yes, next show. But yes, for sure, defensive tackle is something that we'll have to look into.
But the good news is this draft seems to be big on defensive tackle, defensive end trench players. If we are to wait till the second round, I like this guy a lot. Danny Dennis Sutton out of Penn State, 6'5", 265, played 55 games, had 78 solo tackles, 34.5 tackles for loss, 23.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 7 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. This is career numbers at Penn State. He's got the size that you look for. Works through traffic. I looked him up. I mean, highlights on YouTube. That's all I got. I can get my hands on. But looking up his highlight tape, he's able to fight through traffic and works hard. And like I said, the size, the mobility. What are your thoughts on Danny Dennis Sutton?
Yeah, this is a guy that for me has been a consistent performer on that Penn State defensive front. I mean, I've been a little bit overshadowed by guys like Abdul Carter and some other players that Penn State's come through there from. But again, last back-to-back years, 8.5 sacks. 13 tackles for loss last year, 12 tackles for loss this year. He's got 5 forced fumbles the last 2 years. He's got 7 for his career. We talked about the size, 6'5", 268, 33+ inch arm length. Again, fits the criteria Dennis Allen's looking for. He's not a guy that's got, again, he's got some stiffness in the lower half, right? So he's not twitchy. He's not a guy that's going to bend that corner and flank, with ease in terms of, getting around the offensive lineman. But, he's a guy that gives you some of the consistency in terms of, being able to be there and provide some pressure. So that's why, because he doesn't have the athletic traits as some of the other guys, so he's not going to probably go in that first round. But he's a guy definitely in that second round range that if he's there, if you've gone defensive tackle or if you've gone a different position in the first round, he's a guy that if you want to bring in a guy that's going to be an able body, a guy that's senior, a guy that can go in there and probably produce from day one. Again, is he going to be a 10.5 sack guy every year in year out? No, but he's going to give you good effort. He's an athlete. He's a good straight line athlete. He doesn't have the change of direction that you look at some of the other guys. But he's going to be a hand in the ground defensive end. A lot of times, like when I watched him at Penn State, he looks like he's tailor-made for that 9 technique, which is a 9Y technique, which obviously the Bears don't utilize that much, but it's mostly like something like the Eagles use and some of the other teams use. But, he's got that straight line ability to get after the quarterback, from that wide position, with the length to be able to press and get to him. So great straight line athlete. Again, a 5-star high school recruit coming out, out of Maryland. He also lettered in basketball and track and field. So just going to give you that idea in terms of the overall athlete this kid is. But you put that, athletic ability with that size, with those dimensions, and again, the consistency in terms of what he's done at Penn State. I think if you get this kid in the second round, if you don't get a defensive end or don't address that position in free agency, veteran free agency, I think if this kid's in the second round, this kid you can kind of take a chance on and see what you can do here in Dennis Allen's scheme.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the size is the number one thing that sticks out to me. And I mean, 7 forced fumbles, man. Get after it. That's I like to see
Yeah,
that. Let's
and
get some more
again,
turnovers.
consistency. He's not flashy. He doesn't have the 13, 15 sack seasons, 8.5 back to back. But again, 25 tackles for loss last 2 years. He's getting into the backfield. He makes his presence felt. He plays hard. He doesn't, he chases from the backside. So you want to see that. And again, causes turnovers. 7 forced fumbles for his career, 5 in the last 2 seasons. That counts, and that's something that, coupled with that size and athletic ability, I think the Bears and Dennis Allen would like, especially in that second round range.
Yeah. What about LT Overton? He's kind of got the size too, 6'5", 278 out of Alabama. He's played 49 games, has 61 solo tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery for his career. So the numbers don't really jump off at you. What can you give me on this guy, man?
Yeah, this is a guy that really a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, right? Went to Texas A&M for 2 years and then transferred to Alabama. Made only 4 starts while there at A&M, and then he's been here with Alabama the last couple of years. 2025 was his first full year as a starter. This is a guy, again, 6'3", 278. I was told he's going to come in between 33 and 34 inch arm length, so it has that length. But again, he's not a guy that's going to explode off the edge. He's not a guy that's going to come in and it's going to, give you that double-digit sack effort, right? He's a guy that, for his career has only had 7 sacks in his collegiate career. But what he does is he plays with effort. He plays with a high motor. He's got the size. He's going to be at worst, he's going to be a base defensive end that's going to be able to play the run. He could also be a 5 technique for any 3-4 teams. The more I watched LT though, the more I liked him when he kicked him inside. So he's got potential to kick inside to be a defensive tackle for me. So that's where I
loves that versatility.
So that's where I'd see him there for the Bears specifically. So, but again, he's more of a day 3 guy, early day 3 guy, probably 4th round is where I'm looking at for him. But again, give you some of that versatility. Again, not going to be the guy that's going to be that's going to light up the sack totals, but he's going to be a consistent performer. He's going to be part of a rotation and gives you that versatility to play base end and also kick inside the defensive tackle. So I think that's why LT Overton, if he's available in that day 3 range, 4th round probably, I think that's where I could look at him.
Yeah, if I can get an Alabama prospect on day 3 of the draft, sign me up, man. If they go with Daniel Jeremiah, said they'll take Dylan in his first mock draft. I know you don't do mock drafts, Danny, but I'm all about it. So Daniel Jeremiah in his first mock draft had him taking Dylan Thieneman, I believe
that's from Oregon. Safety from Oregon, yeah.
Right. So
I don't do safety in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need edge. I think our chat is agreeing with us.
Maybe we can cover it real quick. I don't want to cut you off. Sorry about that. I real quick. I want to say, like, everyone's worried about the Bears have no safeties on the roster currently under contract. I understand. I totally agree. But they're going to resign Kevin Byard. You can bring back Elijah Hicks to be a backup, a good special teams player. That's going to be a modest contract. You can go get a veteran to play opposite of Byard. Hell, if you want to bring back Garner Johnson on a 1-year deal to start opposite of Byard, I'm good with that as well. And you can draft a kid 3rd round. Possibly this kid Halsey from LSU is a kid I love. It's a 3rd round kid you can look at. We're talking about Bud Clark from TCU, another guy you could probably get in the 3rd round. Potentially there as well. So you can fill those numbers up real quick. So I'm not worried about it as long as Byard's got to come back just because of the production he did on the field last year. I know he's up there in age, but he's still producing in terms of being a ball hawk. And more importantly, guys, he's a big-time leader in that locker room. He's a big-time leader in the locker room. You cannot lose Kevin Byard. So
every pregame speech was Kevin Byard, it seemed like. So
you need to bring back Kevin Byard. Like I said, Elijah Hicks is a good backup special teams contributor. You could bring him back on a modest contract. Get a veteran, whether it's CJ or whether somebody else on a modest deal to start opposite of Kevin Byard. And you pluck one in the draft, and there you go. You have your 4 safeties. Right. Again, if your front 7 is good, your safeties don't have to be all pro, guys. They don't have to be all pro. Corner, for me, is more of a glaring need than safety right now. Cornerback, believe it or not.
Well, we were kind of getting left in the dust by those Packers receivers in that playoff game, so I could definitely see that. I'm with you. I'll bring back Byard. I'd much rather have Jonathan Owens back than I would Elijah Hicks, but pick your poison there. But another guy that can help us up front, Caden Curry out of Ohio State, 6'3", 260, 54 games played, 71 solo tackles, 25 tackles for loss, 15 and a half sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. What are your thoughts on this guy, man?
Yeah, this guy up until this past season was mainly a special teams guy. He was a guy that rotation would get a snap here and there, but he was a guy that was on special teams. And last year, he blew up. 11 sacks. I think basically he took over that Jack Sawyer position there with Ohio State. As a
It's a guy I wanted last year.
as kind of like a tough, lunch pail type of defensive player. It doesn't do anything flashy. Again, accumulated 11 sacks, but a lot of those were just effort sacks. Just his motor is a high energy, high motor guy. Doesn't stop. Continues going after it. It doesn't bring you anything in terms of size and length. It doesn't have that twitch you elect about in terms of fierce. Pass rushers, but again, it's just someone that I think could be potentially a rotational guy, will definitely help you out on special teams. But we're kind of picking and choosing here. This is again, Curry's another for me a day 3 guy. He's not a day 1 or day 2 guy, day 3 guy. That I just wanted to kind of bring his name to the forefront. Say, hey, if the Bears pluck him up in say round 3, 4, or 5, or whatever, but hey, I heard this name before. I heard him on Draft on Tap, and this is what he brings. Again, 1 season as a starter this past year. And he had a great year, 11 sacks. So, It gives you, again, that high energy, high motor guy that will do whatever he wants or give you whatever, he needs to give to get the job done. And, a little bit undersized, can get pushed around in the run game. It's got to get a little bit stronger, more stout. Another one, we talked about LT Overton. I saw him. The more I saw him, I liked him inside. Another kid now could kick inside to be a 3 technique there as well. So could potentially help you in 2 different spots along the defensive front. So that's why Curry made the list here.
Did you mention his arm length, or do you have a?
I have not been able to confirm his arm length yet. That's another one of these players that I'm waiting for the combine and see what it comes in. But I think it's going to be a sub 33, but we'll wait and see what the official numbers come in at.
So sub 33, that sounds more and more like a guy you kick inside anyway.
Probably. Most likely, yeah.
One more guy. I didn't get all of his numbers on this one. Vincent Anthony Jr. out of Duke. He's 6'6", 250. I've been running mock drafts too, Danny, and I keep seeing this guy hit on the 4th, 5th round, and I'm like, well, he's got the size. I don't really know a whole bunch about him. You got anything on this guy here?
Yeah, Senior Bowl guy. There's another one guy that's flash in the Senior Bowl practices, and like you get it, Vincent Anthony Jr. I had not seen him, to be honest with you, up until I saw him at the Senior Bowl. 6'5", 246. So it was a little light in the pants there, but he's got the 34+ inch arm length. All right, he's got an 82+ inch wingspan, and again, 6'5", 246. 3-year starter for Duke. All right, 42 starts. Modern honorable mention ACC last year, had 7.5 sacks. Okay, last year with 13 tackles for loss. This is an active, young, developing player with length and size. To be honest with you, he reminded me a lot of what I saw with Booker. Coming out of Kansas.
Explaining him.
Yeah, just a guy that's got the length, that's got the first step quickness, it's got the ability to get after the quarterback and provide some pressure. But just not there in terms of his body. He needs some development, right? And at 246 is what he weighed in at the Senior Bowl. You put about 10 pounds of muscle on him at 256, and you can maybe stand him up and be a guy that comes in and can rush on the outside. But again, another one that has that length. I mean, when he wraps up, he engulfs the ball carrier because of those long arms. So short tackler at or around the line of scrimmage. But again, just intriguing. He's more of that developmental type. You bring him in, your system, you coach him up, get him a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. You might have yourself a rotational player there in a couple of years. But yeah, definitely a guy that intrigued me at the Senior Bowl. Watch some of his tape. Really liked what I saw. Obviously, again, developmental prospect will need some work. I'm not saying he's going to come in next year and be a defensive rookie of the year candidate, but he's a guy that can come in and give you something that you can build on, and like a piece of clay that you can go and mold into a player like Booker basically has become for the Bears.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. He could spell Booker, let him get some time off the field so he can to get going. And we got people in the chat. Obviously, a lot of defensive tackle talk. True Pilgrims.
One more thing I just want to bring up, AC, real quick. It's Max Llewellyn, kid from Iowa. Another one of these guys that a bit of a tweener in terms of size, 6'5", 255. I was told he only has 32-inch arms. Somebody else told me he's got over 33-inch arms. We'll find out. But again, length might be an issue there. Just a 1-year starter at Iowa last year, 6.5 sacks. 6 pass defense, 2 forced fumbles, 9.5 tackles for loss. Active body. A guy that's at around the line of scrimmage. Can get blown up in terms of the run game, in terms of especially double teams. But there's times when he keeps his pad level low, plays with good leverage. He can extend his arms, get into the backfield. Does a good job in terms of like slicing and dicing into those B gaps and making a play on the backfield on a running game there. So a nice spin move in terms of a pass rush. You saw it on his tape. In Iowa, I watched him like versus Indiana. He gave Indiana a pretty hard time there trying to block him in that game versus Iowa. And I also saw that spin move in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. So, he's got some semblance of a pass rush arsenal. He's got a game plan there. Again, active body. He's got some, some length, got some juice in his frame. Again, developmental guy, could come in here and maybe take a year to get stronger. At Iowa, they did kick him inside defensive tackle a couple of times. Not sure I see him there at the pro level. I do see him as a guy that can get stronger and give you some juice there on the outside as edge player. Will he ever be a full-time starter at defensive end? Possibly, but definitely some guy that intrigues me in terms of size, potential, and also that twitching. He's got a little twitchiness in his body that I think he's going to test better than a lot of people expect at the combine. So keep an eye on Max Llewellyn.
How big did you say he was?
6'5", 255 is what he came in at the Senior Bowl. We'll see what he comes in at. The arm length for me is big deal. If he's sub 33, most likely some scouts I talked to said he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. A lot of them saw him that way. Some saw him as a special teams contributor. I'm like, well, potentially he could be someone that could come in and give you something there as a potential situational pass rusher in the future. So Max Llewellyn from Iowa is a guy that, to me, flashed at the Senior Bowl just like Vincent did. But also when you put on his tape, put on the Indiana tape, you can see him, number 48, making plays. It gets blown up a couple times in the run game, but there's times where he's constantly, providing pressure in Mendoza's face. So Max Llewellyn from Iowa, guys, don't forget that name.
Did you see him any against Oregon? Because that was another big game Iowa played this year.
I watched the Indiana game in terms of his game film. Yeah.
Okay. So AJ Johnson in the chat is asking us about is it Yakus or Jackus? I know it's Gabe.
Yeah. Yakus is a guy that I like a lot, man. He shows some juice there in the Senior Bowl, and from what I was told, he's going to come sub 33-inch arms, and I think that's a lot of teams have kind of earmarked him for as an outside linebacker there. So I think he might not be the physical fit that Dennis Allen's looking for in his edge guy. So
okay, well, we'll see. I mean, it'd be a hometown kid if they were to bring him in. I'm sure.
I mean, he flashed. He definitely flashed. And there was one matchup it was him versus J.C. Davis, his teammate. It was a good battle between two Illini players there. So at the Senior Bowl in 101. So yeah, he's definitely a guy that intrigues me, but I just don't think he'll be a fit in terms of what Dennis Allen likes to like in terms of size and length at the defensive end. So
yeah, there's a guy that doesn't fit us as far as a scheme, but somebody brought him up in the chat earlier. I love Cassius Howell at Texas A&M.
Talk about ankle flexion. Talk about twitchiness. Cassius Howell is what we're looking for, right? He is a guy that is the predominant edge guy here, but unfortunately, he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not a guy that's going to be a hand in the ground defensive end at this next level, especially in the way the Bears like to play out up front. So that's why Cassius Howell is not mentioned here, but he's a guy that, first of all, he's not going to be there in 25, in my opinion. I absolutely love this kid in terms of how he plays the game in terms of intensity, the way he pursues after the quarterback, and I talked about his physical traits already in terms of his ability to bend and get around the corner and flank to the quarterback. Potentially to be a really elite pass rusher at the next level. Had to get a little bit stronger. Has some stuff that he's got to work on, some counter moves, but definitely has the athletic ability. If you're looking for a 3-4 outside linebacker that can provide pressure, for some reason he just screams Tampa Bay Buccaneers for me, and I can see Todd Bowles utilizing him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I mean, but hey, I could be wrong, but that's how I see Cassius Howell.
Yeah, I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", 245, maybe a little thinner even than that. But I love watching him. It'll be fun to watch him at the combine if he does the hoop. That'd be really fun to watch because the way he bends the edge,
especially the 3-cone drills. A lot of people do 3-cone drills. You want to see some of the agility, some of that ankle agility, ankle flexion, loose hips. The 3-cone drill numbers. I think he's going to be someone that look out in terms of what he does there in terms of his numbers in the 3-cone.
I know this is kind of off the wall, and maybe he went back to school. To Harold Perkins, he popped like 2 years ago at LSU. He may have went back to school, but is there anything on him
Harold Perkins is in the draft. He's an off-ball probably more likely going to be a will linebacker. That's not the position we haven't talked about here. Is the linebacker is going to be, and we touch on it currently briefly in our needs, but off-ball linebacker is going to be a need position for the Bears as well. So the great news is this draft is deep in off-ball linebackers, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get into that position here in the coming weeks, but talk about Harold Perkins. We talked about this kid, Kyle Lewis from Pitt, who's a tweener safety / linebacker. He made plays galore at the Senior Bowl. Bratcher from Oregon is also another guy. Just looking at what you look, in terms of what you want there. There's also talk about the Bears maybe moving on from Tremaine Edmonds, so that again that will just kind of increase their need in terms of what they need at off-ball linebacker. But yes, off-ball linebacker. Good news is it's a deep position here in the draft. You can probably get one in the third round and come in and contribute for you right away as a rookie.
Yeah, so definitely, if you're loving the draft and you love the Bears, this is a perfect spot for you. Just like, comment, subscribe to the Ballroom Radio Network, and hit the notification bell to tell you when we go live. But we're going to try and go live every Monday, every couple of Mondays, depending on how the schedule lines up. We just wanted to give a little taste here, and like Danny's been saying, and a lot of people in the chat, defensive tackle is next up. So we wanted to cover the edge rushers today. We'll cover defensive tackles. I'm sure later on down the road we'll cover linebackers, corners, safeties, and all those things. Just hit the notification bell to tell you when we go live. But until next time, Danny.
And a shameless plug real quick, AC, if I may. If you guys haven't subscribed, my YouTube page, @Shimon Draft Scout, on my YouTube page and I'll have a lot of in-depth scouting reports on a lot of these players we talked about. For example, some of the defensive ends we talked about tonight, I will be posting some videos with my in-depth scouting reports with clips on it as well. So hit like, subscribe to my YouTube page @Shimon Draft Scout. Well, a lot of these players we talk about during Draft on Tap, I will have video clips and scouting reports posted out there as well. So please follow, and like I said, whenever I post something, get notifications, and you can go on and you can listen to my complete scouting report on a lot of these players. So sorry about that. As a little shameless plug there. So
I'll have to remember that for next time when I'm closing everything out, so I'll give your YouTube a shout out as well. Of course, I'm a subscriber. I got my notifications set up. It told me when we went live and everything. But if you're a draft nerd and a Bears fan, this is the place for you. But till next time, we'll just leave everybody with a bear down.